What's up, everybody? Welcome to the video. Chris Pennell here. We're breaking down week 15 of the NFL season for DraftKings and FanDuel. If you enjoy, make sure you put a like down below, subscribe to the channel for brand new. Let's dive right into it. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position, and I'll start with cash games first because honestly, this is a very spread out week, and there's many ways we can go for tournaments. I would say the number one cash game quarterback is going to be Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. He comes in at $6,000 on DraftKings, $7,800 over on FanDuel, and I'll show you guys in the stacks and whatnot. But Arizona, given their average price point for each starting player, with a 26.5 point implied team total versus New England Patriots defense, I mean, they are popping pretty much across the board. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, they are near the tops of the list as far as either value or ownership. So it'll definitely be a popular way to go on this slate. Obviously, we can deviate away from that in tournaments, but Kyler's rushing and passing upside does offer a really nice floor and a bit of a ceiling as well. So for me, it's Kyler Murray or bust in cash games. You can make a case for Justin Herbert versus Tampa Bay at home, but he would probably be my second option there, Kyler Murray being number one. But let's shift our focus towards tournaments because that's where the money is, and we'll be talking some stacks here and quite a few stacks this week. Like I said, outside of Arizona, I think it is a pretty spread out week. We do have some other spots that are going to be very chalky. I can show you guys like a plot chart here. This one's of current projected DraftKings ownership, which it can change by the time Sunday rolls around, but we have it compared to the team total, which is obviously something that we should be looking at every single week. And as you can see, Arizona, Cincinnati, I mean, those are going to be the chalk spots this week, and we'll get into the specific stacks in a second, but I think it's kind of easy to look at something like this to try to visualize like, hey, maybe I should go this way in tournaments. Maybe I should look at these guys in cash games. So if we're looking at the upper right quadrant here, the guys in the top right, they're going to project well, they're going to have high totals, and they're going to be highly owned. Arizona at the very top there, and that's obviously going to be a big presence in cash games this week. Same with Joe Burrow's led Cincinnati Bengals with Joe Burrow, Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins this week. And then once you get to the bottom right here, these are some of the teams that I think would make some sense for, say, tournaments, because the further down they're going to be north-south, it's going to be lower owned. And then the farther out to the right, it's going to have the higher team total. So you can look at teams like Washington and Buffalo, and we still have to factor in price tags, and there's going to be a reason why a team like Arizona is going to be high owned, because they're really cheap across the board. But when you have a team like Washington with a similar total to Arizona, Cincinnati, you should be able to get a full stack with them, and the ownership's going to be much lower. So that's just something to kind of take into consideration. And if you compare this to projection compared to team total, like, yes, once again, Arizona, I mean, ownership wise, they're just going to be at the top. But you have a team like Miami that has a very similar projection to Arizona. And while they're still a little bit more expensive, you can stack whoever you want. Typically, there's pieces to work around with that as far as value is concerned. Like Miami projects slightly better than Arizona, but they're going to be much lower owned this week. Kansas City, a team I don't think a lot of people are going to be on this weekend. We'll have to see what the weather looks like in Cleveland as we get closer to Sunday. But the ownership just really isn't there compared to some of these other teams. Like Cincinnati projects amazing and for a good reason. But they're going to be highly owned this week. And you have teams like Detroit, Baltimore, Buffalo, KC that aren't trailing too far behind as far as projections. The ownership is going to be lower. But let's get into the stacks here, and we'll try to go from most expensive to least expensive. But if I can group this by game, that would probably make things a little bit more simple. And we have America's game of the week here. Detroit Lions facing off versus the Buffalo Bills, potential Super Bowl preview. And we're going to be in the Dome in Detroit, so there is no concerns about weather, which is nice because I just want all the points we can handle. Buffalo coming off an amazing game last weekend versus the Los Angeles Rams. And if you watched the Thursday night game, that was not the same Rams we watched on Sunday last weekend, but that game was amazing. I think we had, close to 90 points? Maybe around, what was it, like 44, 41, 42, something like that. Tons of points scored in that one. It was absolutely awesome. I play two lineups typically on the main slate on DraftKings or FanDuel. And for the one lineup, I did Baker Mayfield and the Bucks with the Raiders, and that game busted. And Baker still did well, but I mean, nobody else I played really did anything with him. But on the other lineup, I played Josh Allen, Puka Nacua, and Khalil Shakur for the game stack that. And that went from last place all the way up to like second or third place. I forget where it finished, but came back from the dead in that one. So I want to thank Josh Allen for his heroic, 6 touchdown performance, 57, 55 fantasy points, whatever it was. Absolutely incredible. While we can't project that to happen again, that's the upside that he offers you every single time he is on the football field. So for Detroit, I mean, everyone's playable here, but they're just all expensive, which is unfortunate. If you're looking at their depth chart here, I mean, Jared Goff isn't that expensive at just below 7K, but then Jahmyr Gibbs is 75. Dave Montgomery is 7. St. Brown 76. Jameson's 56. Obviously, Tim Patrick and Sam Laporta aren't that expensive, but one of the issues with this offense is that it's so spread out. It's not like, it doesn't feel like last year where we know Amon-Ra St. Brown is getting that extremely high floor with a potential high ceiling every single week. I mean, he has had some disappointing games so far this year. Even the Lions are putting up a ton of points, but they do have the highest implied team total of the week. And I mean, yeah, if you want to stack the Lions, by all means, go for it, but they're expensive. And for the Buffalo Bills, it looks like everyone's going to be healthy this week. And it's been kind of nice in recent weeks because, I mean, it's basically just been Shakir, but Amari Cooper, I mean, he emerged last week with a ton of targets. Dalton Kincaid looks like he's going to be back. Same with Keon Coleman. So there's just a lot of bodies here. So for me, if I am playing the Bills, I don't mind maybe just playing Josh Allen. Then you get some run back options with Detroit for the game stack, because I really don't think you have to stack with Josh Allen, because I'll be honest, I just don't really know who to stack him with. Then we have Cincinnati and Tennessee. I did have Tennessee listed on here just because Will Levis and Calvin Ridley, that stack is extremely cheap, and you can run it back with some of the more expensive options on the Bengals. Or if you want to go with the expensive route with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, whatever you want to do, maybe you want to go with Chase Brown, you can run it back with Calvin Ridley, and he offers a little bit of salary relief, but it is kind of expensive and kind of hard to do a full-on Jamar Chase, Higgins, Joe Burrow stack this week. You definitely have to try to find some value pieces at either the running back or wide receiver position. But we do have tight ends that are extremely cheap this week in the 2K range that are viable, so that might help some things out. Then we have Baltimore, and I have no interest in any of the Giants players. If I was going to, it's Malik Neighbors, but other than that, I probably just going to stay away. The Ravens have tied for the highest implied team total here with the Detroit Lions. The problem is with this game is that it's a 16.5 point spread, so I'm not sure how much the Ravens are going to have to try here. Obviously, to win by that amount and to put up 30 points, which is their projection, they got to score those points first. So, I mean, it's not like these guys aren't going to get any points. They're one of the second, I think they're the second best projected team for me. If I'm going to play the Ravens, it's kind of just Derrick Henry for me. That is my interest. You could kind of get contrarian with the Zay Flowers, Lamar Jackson stack if you think that's how they score all their points, but I think Henry's probably the best route to go with. And then I really like this Miami and Houston game. 46.5 point over-under. We're in the Dome in Houston, so it's only a 3-point spread, so it should be back and forth. And there's just lots of good options here. I mean, Tua, who's been playing well recently. Then we have Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith, who came on very strong in overtime last week versus the Jets. Then the flip side, Joe Mixon, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, CJ Stroud. Like, this game is awesome. I will definitely want some pieces of it. And I mean, if you want to make it your main stack, I really like this game quite a bit. KC is one of those teams that I think gets a little bit overlooked, but honestly, projection-wise, they don't look bad at all. Now, the issue is, I don't know what the weather is going to be like in Cleveland. We do have some potential rain in the forecast, which I am not usually huge on fading games for precipitation, but if there is wind and if it ends up being heavier rain, I would kind of maybe shy away a little bit, but it's still Friday, so I'm not exactly sure. But Mahomes stacks with Hopkins, Kelsey, I think that's on the board. And then the run backs for Cleveland are all extremely cheap. Elijah Moore, Jerry Jeudy's going to be a staple this weekend. No Cedric Tillman once again. David Njoku looks very questionable. And then Washington, I think, is the last team we haven't talked about, but not that expensive. No Noah Brown anymore, so it's just very condensed. I mean, it's Jaden Daniels, Ryan Robinson, Terry McLaurin, Zach Ertz. That's where the ball goes. Very easy to stack, and I am not scared of this New Orleans defense. 7.5 point spread. I think it's kind of a similar spot as the Baltimore Ravens, but they're a lot cheaper, and the spread's cut in half, so hopefully it's a bit closer. All right, let's move over to the lineup here, and as I always say, just a quick disclaimer. This does not mean I'm playing this lineup. I am simply just grabbing a player that we talked about, throwing it in the build, and then we expand upon that, building a lineup based off of that potential stack that I want to roll with. That would make sense roster construction wise for a single entry type lineup. If you want to use your own favorite plays, apply a similar process. That is pretty much the purpose of this. It's supposed to be, I guess, educational, entertaining, whatever you want to make it, but it's not for me to just hand feed you a lineup, guys. All right, so let's find a quarterback here. Like I said, I really like that Houston and Miami game. Miami's been throwing the ball a ton. Now, I know they went in overtime and they were down 500 points versus the Packers late, and they just had to throw the ball, but they've still been throwing the ball quite a bit. Their run game hasn't really been there. Devon Chan just throwing checkdowns to him is an extension of the run game. So let's just roll a 2 here at $6,100. Get a nice double stack going, and we'll probably run somebody back on Houston, and we'll move on from there. So now we got running backs, and kind of a longer list this week. It was nice last week, and we just had all the cheap running backs, and they all pretty much did well, especially Gary Endo. And then Zach Charbonnet was a late add with Kenneth Walker being out, but he was an obvious play. And yeah, he scored 40 fantasy points. So it was nice last week. We can play whoever we want, just throw in the cheap running backs and lineups or fun. That is not necessarily going to be the case this week, but we do have lots of options, whether you want to go somewhat down low. It's not low like last week with the 4K guys, but so we have to deal with this week. So if you are spending up, well, I guess you should probably start with cash games first. I don't think it's like completely cut and dry. I mean, we have a player pool, but if you wanted to make a case for like 4 of them for being the chalk 2, I think you could. That would be Chase Brown, James Conner, Chuba Hubbard, and Rico Dowdle. I would say those are probably like the 4 cash game friendliest running backs in my opinion. I mean, obviously, if you can play Derrick Henry, Chan Mixon, go for it. But I'm trying to consider price tags here. I know the matchup for Chase Brown sucks, but it's a high total, and they'll just check it down to him a bunch of times. I mean, he's a PPR Jesus this year. I mean, he's on a team that scores a lot of points. I don't really care about the matchup versus Tennessee. Then James Conner, great matchup versus New England, 6-point favorites at home. High implied team total. Chuba Hubbard, with the rookie being out, this is just completely his backfield once again, and we should be getting 20-plus opportunities. And Rico Dowdle's look good, and this is the best matchup you can ask for, as Carolina is dead last versus running backs this year. And once again, he is probably going to get you around 15, 20-plus opportunities, and that's all we can ask for with these price tags. So that's kind of like the 4 cash game running backs that I think are fair. Just mix and match those guys around. If Breece Hall happens to be out, Braylon Allen would obviously be an option as well. And if you're spending up, if you have the money for Derrick Henry, I mean, yeah, he's obviously in an awesome spot. 16.5-point spread, high implied team total, tons of touchdown equity here. I have him projected for 103 rushing yards, so technically you could project him for the 3-point bonus. That's not a guarantee by any means, but if there's ever a spot to do it, I think this would be one of them. Delano Chan, if you're playing Tua, you can play a Chan with him. He's just below $8,000, which, you know, he's a little pricey, but he gets plenty of opportunity. 5.5 targets per game. That's a 16% target share. I mean, he's basically the wide receiver 3 on this team behind Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. Maybe wide receiver 4 with Jonnu Smith's emergence, but still highly involved in this offense, and the touchdown equity is there. Joe Mixon on the flip side of this game, not as involved in the passing game, but still has a 13% target share, 24.9 opportunities per game, and 4.4 targets, 20 rushing attempts. Like, yeah, just another guy with a lot of touchdown equity. Jameer Gibbs on the best offense in the league here, 2.5-point spread in this one. Some involvement in the passing game. I thought it was going to be more this season, but Dave Montgomery has carved himself out a role. Still getting 4 targets per game, 11% target share. Should get you around 15, 20 total touches. Touchdown equity is obviously extremely high. Good matchup versus Buffalo's run defense, who's bottom 3 in the league this year versus fantasy running backs. And I think we haven't talked about Brian Robinson or Rachaad White. So Rachaad White's kind of contingent on the news of Bucky Irving. Even if he does play, I still think Rachaad White is going to be viable. But if obviously Irving is out, that definitely does bump Rachaad White up quite a bit. Then Brian Robinson, if you are not playing the passing attack of Washington, just a really good spot. 26.5-point implied team total here. 7.5-point favorites. And once again, I feel like I keep saying the same thing. There's touchdown equity here. They have high total. They're going to get the ball a ton, but that's the reason they're on this list, because they pretty much all check those boxes. There's not too much separating running backs these days. So when they're all kind of put in the same category for me, they usually just make the list. Okay, back to the build here. Since I am playing Tua, I'm going to have to afford the likes of like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith, some of those guys. And then I'm going to try to run it back with Nico Collins. And that's kind of pricey, so I don't have the money to spend up for Derrick Henry, Barkley, Chan in this build. Although Chan wouldn't, I mean, it's fine to play him with Tua, but it's not what I'm going to do in this build. So since I am not going with Kyler Murray, I still want a Cardinal in my lineup. So we're going to throw in James Conner there. And then after that, we kind of have our pick of the litter here. I think Braylon Allen is $5,400. If Breece Hall is out, I mean, I would really like to just play him and save some money, but I am not sure currently. They're hoping he plays, so it's more of a game time decision. So we have Brian Robinson, Rico Dowdle. I think Dowdle is going to be chalkier than Robinson, and since I'm not playing Washington, it's just for the sake of getting a little bit lower round here. We'll play Brian Robinson and move on to wide receiver. And this is always very redundant from the stacks because, I mean, if I like a quarterback and I like that stack, that means I like their wide receivers. So we just try to keep it as simple as possible where, yeah, if I'm playing Tua, he's got to score points somehow, and that's through either Chan, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Jonnu Smith. Like, it's the only way he's going to score points is if those guys score points as well. So we try to correlate as best as possible. Josh Allen's fine to play naked, but if we're just looking at cash game options here, it's probably just going to be a lot of these mid-range to cheaper wide receivers this weekend. I think T. Higgins is an excellent option. Obviously, if I could afford Jamar Chase, I would love it, but I don't think you're going to be able to too easily this weekend. So T. Higgins, Cortland Sutton projects really well for me. Lad McConkey, assuming he's healthy and good to go. Great matchup versus Tampa Bay. And at $6,300, I'll play that all day. Jerry Jeudy, no Tillman. We'll see if there's any Njoku or not, but either way, Jeudy is still one of the top options for me. Projects extremely well. Shakir, I would love Shakir more, but it looks like everyone's kind of healthy this week. I played him last weekend, but Might have to jump off this week. We'll see what happens. I mean, if I'm playing Josh Allen, I'm playing 20 max, like, yeah, I'll throw in some Shakir, I'll throw in some Amari Cooper, but not 100% sure what the situation's going to be. Like, Cooper at $5,300, I think I'd rather play that over Shakir this week. Assuming the targets will be pretty similar, and I can save about $1,000. Calvin Ridley in an excellent spot versus Cincy. I think he's probably the best FanDuel cash wide receiver this week at only $6,000. Like, he's $1,000 cheaper than Shakir, $1,000 cheaper than Jerry Jeudy, McConkey, Sutton, projected as well, some of them, but that's really cheap price point. It's actually the third cheapest, I think, of any player we've talked about on here, besides Bailey down low and Elijah Moore. That's a great value. Brian Thomas, he's like the only healthy player left. No Evan Ingram. And then, obviously, Trevor Lawrence is going to be out, but Mac Jones will look his way. Jalen Waddle, I like a lot with Tua in tournaments, but the rest is pretty much more so tournament plays if I am pairing with my quarterback, but really healthy cash game options here with Brian Thomas, Calvin Ridley, Jerry Jeudy, McConkey, Sutton, and T. Higgins. I think it's a really strong range. Okay, back to the build here, and this is where we pretty much complete our game stack because I'm going to use all three wide receiver positions for this game that we have Tua in. So we're going to grab Tyreek Hill, our wide receiver 1. We're going to get Jalen Waddle here, $5,700. Some nice salary relief. And then Nico Collins. This is where we break the bank. We could look at Tank Dell. He's obviously a lot cheaper, $5,400, but we're going to see if we can make this work. We can use a cheap tight end on this slate. We can use a cheap defense. I'm not sure where that's going to leave us for our flex because we have $3,300 left. Hoping we can get close to like mid 4K. I think that's probably what would put us around, but we'll see what happens. I think cash games at tight end are pretty cut and dry this week. If you have the money for Trey McBride, he is the clear option versus the New England Patriots. If you don't have the money for Trey McBride, you spend all the way down for Stone Smart with no Will Dissly. And with no Evan Ingram, we have Brenton Strange at the mid price at $2,500. I think it's really as simple as that. The rest of these players on here are just strictly for stacking purposes. Like if I have Jared Goff, throw in Stan Laporta. If I have Tua, Johnny Smith makes some sense. I think it's pretty simple. Okay, we're in the down and dirty part of this lineup here, but we got to finish it off. So for defense, let's just throw in the cheapest one we could possibly make. Not doing the Giants though, but the Browns. I know I'm a Browns fan, but let's be honest, the Chiefs aren't putting up 30 points too much these days. It's certainly possible. This is not the most amazing defense in the world, but they're playing at home. Potential for sloppy weather. The lower over-under. I don't mind some Chiefs stacks and GPPs, but I don't have any Chiefs in this lineup, so it's not like it's hurting me. So for $2,200, I mean, I think we could do worse. So we'll plug them in, and now we can just probably grab one of the cheaper tight ends. Stone Smart or Brenton Strange, whichever one I find first with my eyes. That's who's going to make it, and I just found Stone Smart first. So, I mean, you like Strange a little bit more, by all means, go for it. So we have $5,100 left. I know a tight end, or not a tight end, a running back was going to fit there. But we do have a couple of options here. We have Elijah Moore at $5K, Quentin Johnston, Keon Coleman. If we went Strange and saved $100, that would only get us up to Chris Olave and Michael Pittman, so I don't really think we're missing anything there. We just missed out on Amari Cooper. But for me personally, if this is the range I was in, I would probably go with Elijah Moore. I know Vele down at $4,200 projects pretty well for me, but Elijah Moore is probably the one. So for me, this roster construction does not look too bad for a single type build. We have Tua double stacked with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. We're running it back with Nico Collins, who's an absolute stud. James Conner and Brian Robinson, because I like both of those stacks. I like the quarterbacks, but since I don't have the passing attack there, we got exposure to those teams through the run game. So Conner, Robinson, Smart's just hopefully a smart, cheap tight end play this week. And the Browns defense is the YOLO, but they are very, very cheap. And I mean, what's the worst that can happen, right? And as per usual, we're going to run the optimizer here to see which players are popping. It's Friday, so obviously there's a lot that can be riding on these injury reports. So I'll tell you right now, I currently have Bucky projected in, Brees Hall projected in, David Njoku projected in, just for the sake of I have no idea yet. So just know when projections are being ran right now, that is the case. So we're going to add some randomness on here. Let's take a tight end out of the flex, although this might not be the worst week for that. You could just completely punt the tight end, and if you want to play Trey McBride in the flex spot, by all means, I don't think that's the worst idea in the world. So we're just going to do some very quick stack settings here. Let's get a wide receiver. Obviously, if you're actually doing this, please take some more time and actually get the settings how you want it, but I'm just trying to make this as bare bones as possible. We're on a quick 20 max here, and I'll meet you in a second. All right, so we got our lineups to run, and just from the eye test here, I am seeing a lot of Kyler Murray, but I'm not surprised about it. So looking at the usage here, yeah, we got two Cardinals up top, Kyler Murray, James Conner, Brenton Strange, throwing in a lot, and Marvin Harrison down here, but since we're requiring a stacking option, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Cortland Sutton, Vele, the two Broncos receivers getting thrown in a lot. So maybe we should up our interest in someone like Bo Nix if his receiving options are projecting pretty well. Brian Thomas, James Brown, McBride, like, yeah, Brown's defense, I mean, they're just so cheap. I guess it makes sense that they're getting thrown in there quite a bit, but basically all players that we did talk about. I do want to look at a couple of these lineups here. So if we look at a Kyler lineup, you can see if he's double stacked, just have Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison, and Flex. That is double stacked. They did not put in a run back option. There was really no great run back options for the New England Patriots. If I was going to, it would be Hunter Henry, but tight end position is so strong just because of the value on the slate plus Trey McBride. This doesn't seem overly necessary. I do want to try to find a non-Kyler Murray lineup here, so we'll see if we can. Yeah, there's some Joe Burrow, and here's our first one I can see. So throw in Chase Brown as well, and then we get T. Higgins. So that's actually fine as a double stack because Chase Brown is used in the passing game, and we did not get a run back option here, but if you wanted to force one in, Calvin Ridley would be the one that I would have the most interest in. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys this week. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, make sure you leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. If you want any of the extra content that I post over on the Patreon, link is down in the description for that. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you all next time.